It's ironic that authors of works that are supposed to appeal to girls have some of the most misogynistic themes to ever come out of Japan. You'd think that dumb whores who fall in love with guys for no apparent reason would be something exclusive to shonen targeted harems. But nope. A popular approach in shoujo is to make the girl subject to a straight-up abusive relationship, which they continue to run back to over and over again, sometimes for hundreds of chapters on end. It's actually rare that the girl realizes how self-destructive the abusive relationship is and gets out of it, or have it be resolved in some other logical way. And thus, the work doesn't serve to address a prevalent social issue, it just makes the girl look like a weak, dependent, useless idiot. This is simple, unadulterated, misogynistic brainwashing. And then you have Kimi ni Todoke. Kimi ni Todoke takes those misogynistic themes, as well as all the frustrating, poorly written cliches that frequently plague shoujo anime and manga, and dumps them all in the trash. The characters are endearing rather than mind-numbingly stupid, and frustration is nowhere to be found. Kimi ni Todoke, or From Me to You, is about a girl named Sawako Kuronuma, who's frequently called Sadoko due to her similarity to the girl from The Ring. This resemblance causes her classmates to misunderstand the intentions behind her actions, for example, assuming that her muttering to herself is her cursing somebody, when she's really just worried about something.
私はなぜかいつも人から謝られる。
She's drawn to the popular and friendly boy Shota Kazehaya, and when he starts talking to her, it kicks off a chain of events that allow her to learn how to become more social and even make some friends. The quality of the story of True Blue Slice of Life hinges greatly on the characters. Slice of Life doesn't really have the possibility of making up for lackluster characters with an enthralling story, due to the quintessential nature of Slice of Life. Rumors spreading around school, or trying to improve for a class soccer game aren't interesting plot points in and of themselves by any stretch of the imagination, but add in great characters with whom you're invested, and suddenly, these typically mundane everyday occurrences can suddenly become incredibly engaging, due to the tension of wanting to see the characters overcome their problems. Another thing Kimi ni Todoke has over other Slice of Life is that it actually has a defined overall direction and end goal, which are clearly defined from the onset. Most Slice of Life anime wander around aimlessly either most or all of the way through. Sometimes, they'll suddenly scrape together an overall plot somewhere in the middle of the series out of nowhere, and cling to that the rest of the way through. Some people like aimless, or even pointless, Slice of Life, but I for one much prefer it when there's an end goal. There are rare exceptions, however, namely Usagi Drop. It gives me something to root for, and gives a sense of satisfaction when that conclusion is achieved. It also makes creators look worse if they try to milk it more, but of course, that doesn't stop some from trying. In other anime with miscommunications and misunderstandings, they were all so poorly done and contrived that they end up making me extremely mad because the characters look like giant retards. That's not the case here. Whenever Kimi ni Todoke isn't sidestepping bad writing cliches completely, it's turning them upside down and standing them on their heads. One of the big problems with Toradora, for example, was the relationship between two of the characters. Long story short, the only thing getting in the way of that was their particularly bad and facepalm-worthy failure to communicate, which, if it had been cleared up, would have completely changed the outcome of the show. Well, assuming events played out logically from there. The entire direction of the show basically hinged on a poorly written failure to communicate. Miscommunications are an overdone way to cheaply generate drama, and Kimi ni Todoke is the only work of fiction I've yet encountered where such plot points not only made total sense, but didn't make me want to throw my computer out the window. The mark of good drama is when it isn't causing you to shake your head, facepalm, or yell at the screen. The anime is doing something right when your thoughts sound like, "Oh no, hang in there, Sawako," rather than, "Fuck this stupid, dumb, retarded bullshit." Melodrama induces frustration in the viewer and draws hatred towards the characters for being stupid assholes, or just makes you laugh. Meanwhile, good drama induces tension and directs your hatred towards the problem itself, or the antagonist, if there is one, and you root for the characters and want to see them overcome it, as opposed to inducing an uncontrollable urge to punch them in the face. In melodrama, you only want the characters to overcome the problem because it pisses you off, not because you're invested in and care about the character's welfare. You're not supposed to hate the characters, you're supposed to be rooting for them. There are only two real flaws with the story in Kimi ni Todoke. The first is the slow pacing in the lattermost third. You'll know you've hit it once you hit the recap episode, which had no reason to be there at all. It's pretty obnoxious in the way it's presented and narrated. Judging from the laziness in the production value department, it was only done so production IG wouldn't have to create new animation. Anyways, it's not that these lattermost episodes are bad in and of themselves, they just slow progress down intentionally, or even divert attention elsewhere entirely. Even Ayane and Chi Shizu, both knowing that Sawako and Kazehaya like each other, privately comment that they should just start dating. The other problem with the story is the lack of a conclusion for the romance between Sawako and Kazehaya. They put off the conclusion for the second season, but it would have worked much better if the pacing were quickened in the last third of this season so that the conclusion would have just been given here instead. It's not that the final episodes are bad. On the contrary, they're actually quite good and pretty satisfying. However, they had every opportunity to tie the metaphorical knot, but didn't. And that was pretty disappointing. But I can talk about that a lot more when I review the second season. But other than those two things, the story is excellent and executes all of its elements extremely well. Like I said, typical school slice-of-life plot points are pretty boring if the characters aren't compelling, and fortunately, Kimi ni Todoke has them in spades. Sawako Kuronuma is one of the deepest, most true-to-life, and just generally well-written characters I've ever seen. One of the best, if not the best. She's also one of the most likable and empathetic. She's emotionally fragile. She worries a lot and overthinks things. She has no confidence and sells herself short. She cherishes her friends deeply. She's selfless and wants to be helpful. Her cuteness stems from her naivete, innocence, and obliviousness. Her development is what Kimi ni Todoke is really about. Making friends, realizing her own feelings, overcoming her lack of confidence and faith in herself, and branching out. Being able to hear Sawako's introspective thoughts offered a great deal of insight into her character, and further cemented her representation as a real person. They provided even more information about how events in her life really changed her, or real-time insight into how she's feeling at particular instance.
間違ってなかったはず。きっと誤解は解けたはず。嘘は一つもなかったもの。本当のことを言ったんだもの。風早くんの名誉は守れたはず。
And they were offered after the events themselves, so the show definitely showed rather than told, as contradictory as that sounds. If you don't find yourself rooting for her, you have no soul. Sawako is true waifu material, and by waifu, I mean an actual wife, as in, she's worth marrying. She's not just some kawaii character design that you happen to think is moe or whatever and dub your waifu. She'd make a good wife is what I'm saying. Legitimately. Sawako's friends are highly defensive of her, which is necessary considering how inept and naive Sawako is, and won't hesitate to help her out. Chizuru is a dense and energetic delinquent who's ultimately a big ol' softie deep down. Ayane is a sometimes conniving but good-intentioned sadist who's actually very observant and aware of the feelings and motivations of those around her. Even Kurumi, Sawako's love rival, feels like a real person with actual feelings and goals, and not just some malignant tumor who's there to ruin the heroine's chance at getting with the guy. Though that's not to say that isn't exactly what she tries to do. She actually has depth. She's not a villain, she's a person. And she also ends up accomplishing much more than simply being a source of conflict. Male leads in shoujo tend to either be too good to ever be real, or such assholes that you totally hate their guts. Kazehaya is a nice, likable, popular guy, but isn't perfect. He's got his own flaws, like jealousy and shyness of admitting his feelings. Sawako likes him because he's a very kind, outgoing guy. They're such different people, yet the show does an incredible job showing their chemistry and making me believe in the romance between them. It develops slowly and naturally, and unlike other shoujo, he actually has good reason for being interested in the protagonist. It's great that Sawako has people around her that see her awkwardness and are there to try to help push her along. Kimi ni Todoke is about her. It's her story, and it's not really that big of a deal that the characters around her don't develop a huge amount, because she more than makes up for it. The characters are extremely realistic all around. They're people. They have problems. They make mistakes. They don't always know what to do. They fail, but they learn. They change. They grow. All of this is depicted wonderfully in Kimi ni Todoke. The only gripe I have is that Kazehaya could have used a little more attention, considering his importance for the plot. However, like I said, the almost complete focus on Sawako excuses the lesser attention to the other characters. They went pretty fast and hard with the chibi in the show. Traditionally, I've hated it, because in my experience, it's mostly used at inappropriate times. See Full Metal Alchemist. In Kimi ni Todoke, I actually really liked it, but it had too many times when the situation was serious, but they still decided to make Sawako, or other characters, look chibi for whatever reason. The use of chibi in serious scenes totally takes the piss out of the mood and breaks immersion. It's like the creators themselves aren't taking the serious scenes seriously themselves, and don't want you to either. The other problem is that it's just used so fucking often in general that the amount of time Sawako spends chibified is almost equivalent to the amount of time she spends looking normal. That's way too much. They seemed to like flip-flopping between chibi and normal way too often. I like Sawako's face. She's cute. I like her chibi face, but I love her normal face just the way it is too. I want to see it the most often. Chibi is supposed to do two things: make the character look cute and be funny. The chibi was so frequent and at times inappropriate that it had an effect adverse to what chibi is supposed to have. It was so abused that it started to muddle Sawako's representation as a character and a human being. Speaking of Sawako's face, the character designs are simple but still pretty cute. I liked them quite a bit. They're one of the better things about the visuals. However, the flaws in the art really shine when characters are shown from side angle shots. Characters, namely those who aren't important, when shown at a distance, are frequently drawn without faces, and just look very undetailed as a whole. They seemed to like to look at characters from far away just so they wouldn't have to put detail into drawing and animating them. Background characters are frequently drawn either without detail, or simply as bluish-white blobs. The backgrounds and scenery look like they were drawn in pencil and then painted with watercolors. I quite liked that quaint style, but the fact that these backgrounds are the only thing that's actually noteworthy about the visuals doesn't speak well about the production values. They slightly overuse the sparkling backgrounds and borders that you can typically expect shoujo anime to use during cute scenes. They often implement a soft white fade around the edge of the screen, though it's hard to notice unless you're looking. These things aren't nearly as big of problems as the poor animation and the major lack of detail in characters when shown at distances. The animation is plagued by the overuse of still frames. The animation of characters isn't fluid at all, but animation used for certain pieces of scenery is pretty good. I don't know why they decided that the trees needed to look nice but that the characters didn't matter. Production IG seemed to have a lot of money left over from being so stingy during the mid to latter most segments of the show, where the visuals were lacking more than the other parts of the show, because the last few episodes look much better than the ones preceding them. All in all, the visuals are the most lacking part of Kimi ni Todoke. Mamiko Noto is a major contributor of the magic that brings Sawako to life. I love her lower pitched voice. It's a great change from the monotony of overly high pitched, overly sugar-coated, overly try-hard, overly obnoxious moe blob and pedo bait voices that are all too abundant nowadays. This role seems to be the role she was born for. She feels like she really is her character. Her delivery is absolutely perfect in every regard. Sawako's joy, her pain, her uncertainty, her excitement. Mamiko Noto reflects every emotion flawlessly.
寂しい。夏休みが明けたらもう目も合わせないかもしれない。もうおはようって笑ってくれないかもしれない。避けられるかもしれない。そんなの慣れてたつもりだったのに、私あんまり嬉しくて慣れなんて忘れちゃってた。風早くに会う前の自分なんて。
Her performance as Sawako is the most outstanding voice acting I've ever had the pleasure of hearing. I really can't do it justice just by describing it with my own words. You really have to hear it for yourself. The others say you do a great job as well. Of particular note are Miyuki Sawashiro and Yuko Sanpei as Ayane and Chizu respectively, who are also fantastic at depicting their characters.
掴んだぞくるみね出たヤノチのママハズラ友エコ危ない下がって見てろよ化粧水のメーカーまで吐き出させてくれるなんか市場混ざってるヤノチン
Aya Hirano is also perfect at depicting Kurumi's two-faced self-presentation, putting on a front to make herself appear as cute as possible, while actually being quite manipulative. The OST is composed of light, airy piano and acoustic guitar, and is perfectly fitting for a show like this. Pure White Story reminds me of Canon, which is a good thing. The tracks are great mood-setting pieces that go great with their respective scenes. However, whenever the chibi abuse is going down, dissonant soundtracks are often there to accompany it. Mamiko Noto will also sometimes use her goofy voice that she sometimes sometimes uses when she's cheapified. Kimi ni Todoke is, unfortunately, one of those rare titles where the presentation actively detracts from the substance by conflicting with the mood, both audibly and visually. Some of the tracks are a little overplayed. The OST could have used a little more variety for scenes with certain tones. It didn't quite have enough tracks to keep them fresh for a 25-episode series. The opening theme, also called Kimi ni Todoke, is a nice, quaint, light-hearted song that sets you in the mood for the normal tone of events. In complete contrast with the opening theme is the ending theme, Kata Omoi, which means unrequited love, which, as opposed to reflecting the less serious side of the show, embodies its more dramatic and serious side. Both songs are quite good, but the ED is my favorite. Despite how otherwise excellent the writing in Kimi ni Todoke is, it's not very good at keeping a straight face during the drama. Rather than allowing tender or serious scenes to play out naturally, it often chooses to kill its own mood and derail it with comedy whose timing is outright baffling. It started to happen so often that whenever something serious was happening, I was expecting the mood to derail itself, and was actually surprised when it didn't happen. This fact is undoubtedly the biggest flaw of the series, even more prevalent than either the pacing slowdown or lack of a solid conclusion. It's not that the show lacks the ability to be serious. It clearly does. It just chooses not to be a lot of the time instead for whatever reason, much to its detriment. That aside, the comedy is absolutely hilarious whenever it's not inappropriately timed. A good chunk of it revolves around Sawako's awkwardness and ineptitude, and most of the rest are jokes that play off of other characters' personalities. The well-placed cheapification is actually quite hilarious and well done. This show has made me realize that I personally enjoy a good shoujo more than a good shonen. I like the cute moments in romance more than the action. Kimi ni Todoke is romance at its purest and most innocent, completely unfettered by any perversion or brainless fan service, lust, or sexism, left to develop slowly like an acorn planted in the ground, slowly growing into a steadfast oak tree. Is it a little idealistic? Yeah, but do I care? No. Pros. The characters are incredible and lovable, especially Sawako. Her character is incredibly nuanced and her development is fantastic. The execution of school slice of life was great. The romance was heartwarming and involving. The cute moments were, well, cute. Mamiko Noto puts in the best voice acting performance I've yet witnessed. The appropriately timed comedy is hilarious. The music is perfectly suited for this show, and there isn't a shred of fan service to be found. Cons. The tone is often derailed during serious scenes. Like I said, this is the biggest detriment of the show. It dragged its feet in the lattermost third. The show has a frustrating lack of a solid conclusion, and the visuals are mediocre in most respects. Critic score, 9.0 out of 10. Among shoujo, it's the best I've yet seen, and the shoujo demographic will be hard-pressed to find a better anime. Shoujo score, 10 out of 10. Masterpiece. Now, some of you may be wondering why I'm holding it against the first season that it doesn't have a conclusion for the romance while the second season does, if I'm judging it by its own merits. Well, aside from what I said with the pacing slowdown that's obviously there to put it off, the second season frankly shouldn't have existed. It wasn't necessary, and it added nothing to the story. I won't go into that anymore here, but I'll definitely be reviewing it. I'll just say it's quite disappointing, especially compared to this season, and leave it at that. Kimi ni Todoke is actually very similar to Usagi Drop. Sure, the core subject matter is fundamentally different. One is about school and romance while the other is about parenthood, but their level of depth and sheer number of themes and morals are nearly identical. There are tons of life lessons to be had, and tough questions that are examined. I don't even want to spoil any. You should check both out for yourself. Other similarities include the masterful realism of the characters, and representation of real-life situations. They both have an abundance of cute moments. Their soundtrack styles are similar, and their art styles are even similar, although Usagi Drop's visuals are better. I'm sure that this is just because Production IG just didn't try as hard when animating Kimi ni Todoke. They're also both innocent and clean. Essentially, Kimi ni Todoke is Usagi Drop's more awkward little sister. Kimi ni Todoke is the Usagi Drop of shoujo. Just as Usagi Drop is the queen of josei, Kimi ni Todoke is the queen of shoujo. As far as I'm concerned, they can both hold hands together as the masters of the slice of life genre. They both take incredibly simple premises and plot points, execute them brilliantly, and end up making something incredible. Kimi ni Todoke is one of those anime that make generic and uninspired school slice of life anime look bad. The show is engaging even in its slow pacing and simplicity. Other school anime should use it as an example for how to handle the setting in a way that doesn't result in monotonous, repetitive, cliche-ridden trash. It's a fantastic anime, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're a shoujo fan.
一つだけ見つけて